REED-BBS. BBS. Blackberg Sugar, Bachelor's in Boxing Studies. Television! Fred Sanford of the Fistic Arts. When all is said and done, there's nothing left to say or do.
REED-BBS, BBS. So we had the press conference for Keith Thurman versus Tszyu, and ROLLY Romero versus Isaac Pitbull Cruz. Also, Irislandi Lara versus Michael Zarafa, with an age gap of nearly 10 years between them. Sebastian Fundora versus Serhii Bohachuk in the pay-per-view opener, vying for a vacant super welterweight title. All of this will take place Saturday, March 30th. PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video, the first of its kind. Pay-per-view can be ordered via normal customer cable and satellite means. And with that, PBC is saying, Showtime what? Showtime who? On to the next. Live on pay-per-view. The presser focused on the fact that Keith Thurman fought at 152 pounds as an amateur and dropped down to campaign at welterweight, ignoring the fact that Tszyu is a naturally bigger man, I guess. And I gotta say, I've been noticing this, and I gotta say, I don't take Keith Thurman as seriously without the hair. I just don't. He doesn't look as threatening or as potentially dangerous as he does with the flowing young iced tea, as they called him, looking locks. He looks way more civilized nowadays. He still talks a decent game, though, in that Daffy Duck way that he has. Now, I won't bore you with a Keith Thurman impression, because everybody that does a podcast on boxing has one. But I quote, "This is what boxing is about. Action, action, action. You come from down under, and I'm trying to put you under, mate. You signed a contract, but you don't know what you just did." He was hyping the fight. Thurman was somewhat awkwardly, but not as awkward or uncomfortably as Boo-Boo Andre did in the David Benavidez build-up. "Mexican Zoo, what you gonna do? Mexican Zoo, what you gonna do?" It was kind of lame. One time he said, please beat me up, Keith. Can I punch you in the face? Please let me beat you up, Keith. Can I punch you in the face? He sold it. You know, Tszyu is a shit talker, but he's more of a quiet, reserved shit talker. You know, he's not demonstrative. He's never loud or hurried when he speaks. It's just very calm, clinical, and matter of fact. And Tszyu, I gave him REED-BBS, my Just Because Award for 2023. Just because I wanted to give him a fucking award. I roll like that. 3 fights, further separating himself from the Costious Kid tag that he carried, being the son of a Hall of Famer. Now, to be clear, Tszyu will never, ever be his father. For those that haven't seen or don't remember Tszyu, he was a 140-pounder, cold, stoic, Russian boxing prodigy. He was more technically sound and athletic than Tim, and a more explosive puncher. But that's a testament to just how good Tszyu was, and no slight whatsoever on his son. And Tim's more than earned my respect, which ain't easy to do for famous boxing offspring. It just ain't. But Tszyu showed, and Tszyu proved. They spoke of the level of activity Tszyu has had versus Thurman's. Tszyu will be Thurman's 4th fight in the last 5 fucking years. In roughly that same span, Tszyu's had 13 fights versus increasingly stiffer competition. PBC era fighters, man, they're starting to become known in a negative way for their layoffs in between fights. Now, we've seen Errol Spence endure some layoffs, some of which were self-inflicted, but he's one case in point. Charlo, look how he looked after a layoff against Canelo. Of course, Spence after layoff versus Bud. Now Thurman's once again coming off of a layoff. And against a lively, a fresh, young, aggressive guy, hungry guy like Tszyu, I don't think that bodes well. Tszyu spoke on the era, saying, "Fighters in this modern era are pussies. There are no more old school fighters. I'm John Wick, and he's just a name on my hit list." Tszyu also revealed that he sparred Pacquiao to help him prep for Keith Thurman. So he was privy to some Keith Thurman fight footage back then and was told to mimic him in certain ways leading up to that fight. He then said, "I do damage when I get in the ring." All the while, Sebastian Fundora sitting there looking androgynous as fuck, looking like a butch lesbian in a fucking business suit. It was very, his appearance was just very strange and off-putting. ROLLY versus Pitbull. Rollies, as I've noticed, De La Hoya and the Ride Guy call them Rollies versus Pitbull. Now I do have a ROLLY impersonation.
He's gonna look like ROLLY versus the Chihuahua. He looks like a pug right now. He's a little fat.
Now, luckily, they managed to find a stepladder to help minimize Isak Pitbull Cruz's height disadvantage during the stare down. It still was a few inches between them, but they did what they could to get them as close as possible to each other within the same zip code. But in all seriousness, I'm looking forward to this card. Rollies versus Pitbull will be fun. It'll be one of those beer and popcorn type of fights. One of those where you can see and hear the crowd's appreciation for what they're witnessing after each round or after most or some of the rounds. Thurman and Tszyu, I still say it should be called Tszyu versus Thurman, but either way, it has all the makings of a cash out for Keith Once Upon a Time Thurman and a coming out for Tim Tszyu. American soil, Vegas, on the biggest stage, impressively stopping a former unified champion with name recognition. REED-BBS, BBS. Blackbird Sugar, Bachelor's in Boxing Studies. Television, Fred Sanford of the Fistic Arts. When all is said and done, there's nothing left to say or do.